My name is Connie Schultz, and my latest book is Lola and the Troll.
Okay. So, can you tell people what Lola and the Troll is about?
Lola and the Troll, illustrated, I must emphasize, by Sandy Rodriguez, and beautifully so, is about a little girl who is happy and bright and energetic until she encounters Tom the Troll, who on her way to school every day holds up another sign that insults another part of her. And she takes all of these insults to heart, and to the point where she barely recognizes herself anymore. But fortunately, a trusted adult, the bookstore owner, Miss Neesby, helps her understand that she's wonderful just the way she is, and she finds her courage to stand up to the troll.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. Lola, the image of Lola,
yes,
is based upon your grandchild Ella.
That's right. Our little granddaughter Ella, who was 4 when I started writing this, who is now 6, and Tank, the little dog who is in every frame, intentionally so, is modeled after our little rescue dog, Walter.
Does Ella brag to everybody that she's Lola?
She loves it so very much.
Now, this is your first book with an illustrator.
Yes.
You are very used to telling stories with words. Was there temptation to overwrite, or did you find yourself naturally trusting Sandy to be able to tell the story with pictures?
Oh, there's no question I trusted Sandy. Random House gave me I think I had an option of 12 different illustrators to pick from. And as soon as I saw Sandy's work, I knew she was the one I wanted. She is so good at what she does, and she has little girls herself. So she's got that mother's approach to it as well. And she has a great sense of humor. I mean, you may have noticed on the cover, there's that troll sign, Lola loves farts. That came from Sandy. And of course it went on the cover because it makes children laugh like crazy. I do think working with photographers all these years, including on big series, helped me appreciate the collaborative effort that comes about whenever somebody's illustrating your work. So in that way, it just felt like it was a segue, a pivot perhaps, rather than a big transition for me.
What's your favorite thing about Sandy's art?
Oh, nobody's asked me that. That's a really good question. I think it's the way she depicts Lola in all her moods and in all her moments. So you don't have this cardboard little girl. You've got a little girl who is feeling deeply all the different things there is to feel in this book, including when she becomes courageous. And Sandy did a wonderful job of showing what it looks like to be a little girl who suddenly realizes she's small only on the outside.
What's that line from Matilda the musical? Don't let a little thing like little stop you.
Yes, that's a great line, actually.
I didn't invent it, so. Okay, so this is an important 3-part question.
Okay, 3 parts.
Actually, it's 4-part. 4-part. I'm going off script.
Okay.
You have had experience with picture books in at least 4 different realms. As a child, as an author, as a mother, and a grandmother. So I want to ask you about your favorite picture books in 4 different phases of your life. Beginning with, I know, we're going to break it down part by part. What were your favorite picture books as a child?
You know, as a child, because I was the oldest, I was in the role of reading to my siblings pretty quickly. So I don't remember, I remember the Dick, Jane, Sally stuff, but of course those were very stereotypical models, right? What I recall is when I was a mother. This is when it really kicks in for me. And one of my favorite books was The Paper Bag Princess. Help me here. Do you remember the author's name?
Munch.
Yeah.
Robert Munch.
Robert Munch. The Paper Bag Princess by Robert Munch. And I kept that book in mind as I was writing Lola in this way. Elizabeth, I believe the main character is, right?
Yes,
she goes through all this horrible stuff to save the prince, including the dragon burning her off her clothes, which is why she's the paper bag princess. And he's a real jerk when she finally rescues him, and she decides, I'm not going to marry you. And I loved that book because I was raising a little girl, and it was hard to find characters with strong female it was hard to find picture books with strong female characters at that time. There was Brave Irene, there was Abby Keep the Light Burning, there was, of course, Paper Bag Princess, there was Amazing Grace. I know those, I can recite those titles so quickly because it was rare to find those kind of books. Fortunately, we have a lot more books now with girls starring in them and girls who are mighty, but it was really important to me that this book be girl central because little boys can learn from girls too.
And they do.
Yes.
They absolutely do. Whenever you read Paper Bag Princess, especially when you're getting to read it to a kid for the first time, the twist at the end where she decides she is not marrying Ronald, when she's not marrying
right,
Ronald, the delight in their eyes, because they're just so used to how this is going to go. They're like,
And that's why for Lola, I wanted her not to just forgive Tom the Troll when he reveals himself. She's going to hold him accountable. She tells him, you got a lot of apologizing to do, and you can start with me. I wanted it to be that role model for girls, that, you know, the expectation still so often for women and girls is that we are the ones who will rise above it. We will always see the good in people. And indeed we do, and we should, but that doesn't mean that we can't hold people accountable for bad behavior.
is there a particular one that the grandchildren like to ask for the most?
Walter the farting dog. We have a Walter. Who's the author of that? Do you remember?
I'm afraid I don't remember.
Oh my gosh.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm afraid I failed on remembering
They
that.
laugh all the way through that book.
Yeah.
And of course, Paper Bag Princess. I always read to the children. I still love that book. And it came out with its, I think, 25th anniversary edition a couple of years ago. And of course, I bought that one too.
It's wonderful. Now that you've written a picture book, are there any picture books in particular where you appreciate them more because you are a little bit more familiar with the craft of that style of writing?
No, here's what I do appreciate more, is illustrators who write their own books too. Because I was lost without Sandy. I had a great idea, I thought, for a story. Well, actually, my editor, Casey McIntyre, had a great idea. She took a tweet I had and turned it into that great idea.
I was actually going to ask you about Casey.
Well, as you know, Jason, I'm sure you're aware, I've already said this, I will never not talk about Casey McIntyre because this book would never have happened without her. And she saw the potential. She saw an entire book out of a single tweet when I joked that I was going to write a children's book and call it Tom the Troll Has Been Blocked. And within an hour, she was in touch with my agent. And my agent calls me and says, why are you writing a children's book when you're supposed to be writing your next novel? And I said, I'm not writing a children's book. And she said, well, you are now. So that's how that came about, right? I was encouraged by Casey to make, it basically feels like stage direction. With every page of what I figured was, when I decided what was going to go on one page after another, then I gave some ideas or suggestions to the artist I hadn't met yet. Well, actually, Sandy and I've never met in person yet, but before I knew who the artist was. And that was really exciting, but intimidating, because I thought, who am I to? But Casey said, for example, who would you like them modeled after? Do you have any people in mind? That's when Ella, our granddaughter, came to mind for Lola, and Walter came to mind for Tank. So Sandy had to take someone else's story, mine, and turn it into her story as well. It had to be that collaboration. You know, you can be pretty nervous waiting for the first sketches. I mean, did we make the right decision? Is Sandy Rodriguez going to know where I'm going with this? I was just filled with joy when I saw her first sketches. I thought, well, I'm no longer going to worry. She is going to bring this book to life.
Now I have to end on the bummer note. I apologize for that, but I think it's important to talk about her. Can you tell people who Casey is?
Yes, some of your viewers will know who she was and not even realize it yet. Casey was the young woman widely recognized as the young mother of an 18-month-old daughter who died from a recurrence of ovarian cancer last fall. And the reason somebody will know about her is one of her dying wishes was that they would use her death as a chance to raise money and donations for people who can't afford to pay for their medical debt, right? So this was RIP medical debt, and they have raised more than $1 million of hard dollars, which will be multiple millions of dollars of retired debt for people who couldn't afford to pay off their medical debts. Her story was in the New York Times, the Washington Post. It was on the Today Show, I believe, also Good Morning America. Everybody was covering it. But to me, she will always be Casey McIntyre, this incredible editor and woman who saw potential in my book. And I did not know until 2 days before my book came out that this was her last children's book, Lola and the Troll. She had such a wild imagination. And I always knew when I was hitting the right notes because she would laugh like crazy. We would have these Zoom meetings, and I would know when I'm on my way because of her response. I was so nervous to begin this, and she just kept saying, I'm right here with you. We're going to make this happen. Because, you know, I revere children's books. It was really a leap to think I could write one, and she was with me all the way. And she was not alive to see it come to fruition.
Don't get me wrong, her legacy is bigger than Lola,
Much bigger than just Lola.
but it must feel good to have something that's part of her legacy.
Yes,
Did I phrase that poorly? You can correct me.
no, it's hard to, what I try to do is not cry when I talk about Casey. This book is so much about Casey. And part of the reason for that is Casey understood why I felt it was so important for not just girls but women, right, to give some support and in a humorous and dramatic way, if we could, for everyone who's getting trolled, which is so common, especially online. And I also wanted to make sure that the bully that he was redeemable. And I've had a number of teachers and mothers thank me for that, including a mother who's got a son who's been struggling with being the bully recently. She said, thank you for showing that it can come from great insecurity and fear, and that there's something that can be done to help them to not be these bullies. So there's so much thought that went into this, and Casey understood that from day one.
Is there anything more that you would like to add?
Right now, I just want to thank so many people who've been reaching out about Lola and the Troll, including the people I'm going to meet here today in a little bit and all the children. I've been joking with my husband, why would I ever write for adults again? It's so much fun to be writing for children. I am working on my next novel. I got to care for that. Last time I said that, all these people started writing, asking if I'd given up on the next novel. I have not. It's just that with children, they whisper their secrets to me. They tell me how they've been trying to be brave. They draw pictures for me. They write letters. They are excited to meet a children's book author, which had not even occurred to me. If you can tell who's growing up in homes where they're being read a lot because they have reverence for books already. And so they get very excited to meet somebody who's actually written one, right?
Well, working at a library, I often get people saying like, oh, kids don't even read anymore. Kids read with spectacular enthusiasm.
Yeah, they do.
They are so curious about everything that they can be curious about as long as they have those outlets.
And here's the thing, they also have great imaginations.
Yeah, they do.
And they believe Lola exists. They believe that Tank is real. They have lots of opinions about Tom the Troll and the trusted adult, Ms. Sneesby, right, who I deliberately made somebody other than a parent because not all children have that environment, right? And I want to communicate always that there are other people you can trust, and booksellers tend to be some of those people.
Or children's librarians.
And children's
For me, it was a
librarians.
children's librarian named Ms. Parker.
See, there you are. I mean, I owe so much to Ashtabula City Library where I grew up. It was my second home. We didn't have a bookstore we went to. We went to the library. So my daughter said something to me the other day, Ella's mother, that really touched me. She said, Mom, would you have written this book if you weren't a grandparent? And I said, I don't know. And she said, let me answer that. No, this is how committed you are as a grandmother, that you did this big career pivot to write a children's book. And you can imagine how that moved me. It also surprised, there I am again, my kids are telling me what I'm not even seeing about myself. But this is my commitment to children. It's not just my grandchildren. I really, as Casey McIntyre said to me when she first called me, and I said, I've never written about a book for children. She says, no, but you've been writing about children for decades. And she was right. I've had so many different columns advocating for children or sharing insights in a moment with a child. And she knew me better than I knew myself in that moment, which really helped me see my way through this book.
Who was your Mrs. Neesby?
My Miss Neesby, I have to think about this for a moment. Who was my first? Oh, I don't have to think. Mrs. Norton. This is significant. It was in Ashtabula City School. She was my third grade teacher, the only black teacher in our school. Every day, every single day, she would end the afternoon by reading to us aloud from a chapter book. And that ignited something in me. She was the person, first of all, that she would know we needed that. We're talking in the 60s, right? So this was a woman ahead of her time, knowing what would comfort children, what would maybe ease them into their days, knowing some of us weren't going home to the most peaceful homes. And she was the one I could tell my secrets to, and I trusted her, and she looked out for me. So I would have to say it was Mrs. Norton, who died, I believe, 2 years ago.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have a favorite chapter book she read to you? I swear I'm not trying to make you cry.
No, I think we definitely did Charlotte's Web. I remember that well. And I do not remember the others. I just remember the feeling of peace I would have sitting at my desk. And she would tell us we could lower our heads if we wanted, but I always wanted to sit up because I wanted to watch her read. But I just have, isn't that funny? Nobody's asked this. I can remember sitting there. You were worried about asking me questions no one else has asked. You can stop worrying.
I hate to be redundant.
I like that very much. Thank you. But I can remember my seat where it was. It was in the third row from the right. I can remember I would often look out the window as she was reading. And I remember, without having the words for it yet, feeling transported. And I would walk home with those characters in my head a lot, which is, when I think about it now, probably where I first started to understand the power of story, right? And so by the time I'm reading A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, when I'm 12, 13 years old, I was an early reader, I was a big reader, sitting on the front porch reading this girl who's living in poverty, who's the star of that book, I started to understand that the world was much, much bigger, and I was going to be a part of that.